I thought we'd, again, if you wasn't here Wednesday, so Jerry would have got me set up with the PowerPoint like normal, but I hadn't spent a lot of time with the PowerPoints here, and I figured we would spend way too much time trying to figure that out without being in our lesson. And so I still want to go over the questions, but I just got them with the cards. So I know everybody can't read them, but I'll try to talk loudly so you can hear them. I'm not going to start with card number 1. We did that Wednesday, and there'll be time for review, but I just wanted to go over the cards that we went over Wednesday night. So, what was written with the finger of God? The 10 Commandments. Yep. I'm sorry, I just couldn't. I saw your lips. I thought that's what you said. If you said something different, it was wrong if you said something different. The 10 Commandments. God's finger wrote them on the tablets. All right. Who was... Yeah. As everybody's probably noticed with these cards as we've studied them over, 3 years or so now, there's multiple answers, and then the way it asks it on the card, you could go multiple ways. But all right, who was killed for offering strange fire? Ahab and Abiah. All right, what's the results of complaining? This was the men in the desert. They were complaining to Moses. What happened to them? They all gathered together, swallowed up, and then the people that were standing on the outside, the 250, they got hit with fire. You may have said that. I didn't let you finish. I'm sorry. That's the two. Earth swallowed them up, and then fire consumed the ones standing around. All right. What budded, bloomed, and produced almonds? Aaron's rod. If you remember, that was how who's going to lead? We can all lead us. Well, everybody put your rod up. They had 12 rods. Aaron's was the only one that budded. All right. What did the people look upon so that they would live? The brass serpent. Remember the fiery serpents were biting everybody? All right. We didn't go over this one. As my wife was trying to point out the whole time Wednesday night, she kept pointing out number 22, and I didn't know what she meant. I skipped this one, but I bet everybody knows that. Who spoke to Balaam? The donkey. All right, the Jordan River was divided by what happened? Yep. That's it. The priests were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. Joshua told them to step in. When they did, it really, I don't know if I'm not arguing with the card, but they didn't divide it. It just stopped it. Yeah. And when did the walls of Jericho fall? What did they do? 13 times total. That's right. They did, yeah. I don't know. Yeah. No, it just says the marching, but yeah. I don't think so. No, I know it. Well, I don't know anything. The Bible doesn't tell us, but that's right. Yeah. We got a bunch of examples in the Bible where they didn't follow everything and it didn't happen. So. Yeah, there they go again. And they were probably watching out, scared to death too. What's going to happen? But you're right, they're crazy folks. Okay. She was covered, yeah. Yep. All right, the one that I forgot to go over Wednesday night, somehow I skipped it, Balaam. So I went over a little bit with Balaam to get us started. So hopefully all of you were thinking about a donkey speaking to you for the last few days. So Balak was the king of the Moabites. And so Balak was worried. He had seen what the Israelites could do. He knew they had destroyed the armies of Egypt. Here they are coming across. He's worried about what's fixing to happen to his land. And so he finds Balaam. And I don't know, y'all making, I should have studied this a little bit more, I guess, before I got up here, but I don't know that Balaam was, a for sure man of God, or if he was somebody that understood. I don't know. But regardless, Balak believed that if Balaam curses the Israelites, that they won't be able to defeat the Moabites. And so Balak puts together a whole a group of elders, sends them to Balaam, and this can get confusing, Balak and Balaam, but Balak, being the king, sends a whole group of elders to Balaam and says, hey, will you curse the Israelites? And Balaam says, I can't do that. That's God's people. I can't curse them. And so they come back and they tell Balak, no, he won't do it. Well, Balak, he won't take that for an answer, so he sends back again, the second time. And this time, Balaam says, okay, hold off. Let me see if God tells me something tonight. So during the night, God comes to Balaam and tells him, if they ask you to go with them again, go with them, but only say what I tell you to say. So he doesn't give them permission to curse the Israelites, never will. And at the end of the story, you'll find out Balaam brings it up again, but Balaam tells the folks that come to him that I can only say what God will let me say. And so they do come back to him. God says it's okay to go with them. So he heads out to go with them, and he's riding on a donkey. And at some point along the way, the angel of the Lord appears before him, but Balaam doesn't see the angel of the Lord. For whatever reason, he can't see it, but the donkey can. And so the donkey stops. And then the donkey starts backing up. And then the donkey moves over and says it kind of got him into a space, it sounds like, where the donkey can't go to the left or right, and he's crushing Balaam's leg up against a wall, and then there's nowhere else for the donkey to go, so he just lays down. And then Balaam, just like I would be, probably a lot of you would be too, come on, donkey, get up, and he hits him. And at that point, the donkey talks. Says, why are you I don't remember his words, we could read it, but the gist of it is, why are you hitting me? I didn't do anything. And then about that time, the angel of the Lord then appears where Balaam can see him. And the angel says, the donkey saved your life. It was 3 times that I was in front of the donkey, and if the donkey had continued walking, I was going to kill you. And the donkey saved his life. Well, the fun thing about this story to me is you wonder, how did life go between Balaam and the donkey after that? We don't know, but I'm assuming the donkey only talked one time. I'm assuming they didn't have conversations after that, but it would have been a weird ride riding on that same donkey. But that was the donkeys kept him from getting killed by the angel of the Lord, and that was our miracle. The donkey, as we know, donkeys don't talk, right? Other than in Shrek, there's not a talking donkey out there. but God allowed the donkey to talk, and apparently Balaam still wasn't convinced to only speak what God tells him. That's the reason the angel was there. If he hadn't changed, the angel would have killed him because he still had in his heart to do whatever Balaam wanted to do. Well, that's a good point, because I had it wrote down. Let me read it. It's in Numbers chapter 22, if anybody wants to read along. A lot of these stories in the Old Testament, I fall prey to, they're true. Everything's true about them. It's the Bible. It's God's Word. No problem with any of that. So, let me preface it with that. But a lot of these stories don't necessarily make sense to me sometimes. And I'm thinking, do we have the exact translation, or is it just my understanding? He just offered an explanation of why my understanding probably wasn't right. But what I wanted to point out was in Numbers 22, verse 20, it starts with, this is at the end of the story where God gives Balaam permission. It says, and God came to Balaam at night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise and go with them, but only the word which I speak to you, that you shall do. So Balaam rose in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. And then the very next verse says, then God's anger was aroused because he went, and the angel of the Lord took his stand in a way as an adversary against him. So in my small way of reading, I was struggling with that. God told him to go. The very next verse says he was mad because he went. But Mr. Joe just offered that one thought, and it's probably right, is maybe God told him to go, but only speak what I tell you to speak. Maybe Balaam was planning on speaking something more than what he was told to speak. That may be the answer to that verse.
What did Joe say? I didn't hear what Joe had said.
Hey, what I was just saying of maybe Balaam was not prepared to only speak what God said to speak. Maybe that's why the angel of the Lord stopped him on the way, and which would go right along with, if you're not going to speak right, a donkey will. So maybe that's the lesson. Regardless, the miracle in the story, that's something, to look at and to study. But the miracle in the story, and if you remember, the purpose of miracles, that's one of our cards. Anybody got, what's the purpose of a miracle? Card number 3. To prove the messenger, yep. So the angel of the Lord at this point is the messenger. What better way to prove that this guy in front of him is, the messenger without, a donkey speaking, right? So that's the miracle.
My translation does say that when God comes to him, that he says, if the men come to call thee, rise up and go with them. But then it just says that he got up early in the morning and went. It doesn't say that they called for him. So, I don't know if that is leading us to think that he was taking kind of more initiative. And I do know that some of the references that are made, it implies pretty clearly that he was trying to say that he couldn't go against the Lord, but he still wants the money out of it.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to skirt the line of what God told him to do and what he wasn't. And he used as an example, kind of like Esau, of desiring earthly things. So we do know that his motive was monetary possession at the core.
Okay. And you probably heard, but heard Paul say, but and I didn't point this out either in the story. So the Balak, when he sends the folks at least the second time, maybe the first, but for sure the second time, he sends them with some kind of riches, right? Gold, I don't know what, riches. We'll just leave it at that. And so Paul's thought is, maybe he's still trying to figure out a way to not go against God, but still get the riches. How can I walk that line? But that is the story of Balaam. I didn't mean to get us off too much with that one verse. That was just, I like to point out stuff of, this is how my mind works. It may cause you to go back home and study it more on your own as well. The purpose of this class, though, the miracles, and the donkey speaking would be our miracle. And I will point out just something again for you to study on your own. It's just something interesting. We find out that in Joshua chapter 13, Balaam is killed by the Israelites. And there may be more to that maybe I didn't study far enough, but the only, if you just read Joshua 13 in verse 22, it just says, Balaam, son of whoever his son of, killed by the Israelites. And that's it. You don't hear about him. So, all right, so that was number 22. The card spoke to Balaam. It was a donkey. Okay, and then we made it through the walls of Jericho Wednesday night, and then we had made it to the day where the sun and the moon stood still. So if you remember, as Mr. Jerry has pointed out multiple times in classes, and we all kind of knew anyway, right, was God told the Israelites, when you go into the land of Canaan, kill everybody, get rid of all the people that live in Canaan. And what did the Israelites do? They didn't do that, right? So, they're still fighting over that land. If they had followed what God told them to do, they wouldn't have a lot of the struggles. Well, this story is one of those struggles. Not necessarily a struggle for the Israelites. It was God used it for a gain, but they got pulled into a fight where they shouldn't have, right? And the reason is because the city of Gibeon is where this one takes place. And Gibeon, when the Israelites got ready to take over Gibeon, the elders of Gibeon came and said, "Hey, we'll serve you." And the Israelites didn't destroy Gibeon. And this is the one that Joshua makes the people of Gibeon, he's going to make them woodcutters and water carriers. So these are the folks that now they've become friends, and they justified it in a way of they're going to serve us, but they didn't kill them. And so that's where this takes place. Now the story picks up of let me get the right king. I should have had it wrote down. I don't. Doesn't matter necessarily I just should have wrote it down better. If anybody knows while I'm saying it, go ahead. But one of the kings notices that, hey, the Israelites have taken care of Gibeon, but it's the king of Jerusalem at that time. Anybody? Okay, it don't matter. He's the king of Jerusalem, and he's seeing what the Israelites are doing. He's seeing that he's conquering everybody. He's kind of worried, but he's kind of getting mad, so he decides he's going to attack Gibeon. And so Gibeon, not being the Israelites, but now they're the friends of the Israelites, they send word to Joshua and say, "Hey, we're friends, remember? We all agreed we were going to be friends. Come help take care of us." And so God speaks to Joshua and says, they're already, I've already defeated them for you. Just go take it, right? And so the Israelites are at another spot, but they head towards Gibeon to battle with the king of Jerusalem. That's probably why I didn't remember it. Say it again, one more. Okay, that's the king of Jerusalem. And so the Israelites head that away. Well, they get there, they start beating up. God's already given them to them, right? So they're the Jerusalem folks at that time can't stand against Israel. But then one of the miracles that we're not, it's not even part of our cards, but God sends down a hailstorm, and it says in there that the hailstorm killed more of the people than the Israelites did. And so that's the hailstorms going before them. The Israelites are coming, I assume, killing what's left. And then they chase them on to a valley. They chase them to a valley. And Joshua can see that, hey, it's starting to get to be the end of the day, and we hadn't finished the battle. But the battle's going so good, and God's with us, and we can destroy them. So Joshua prays at that point for God to stop the night from coming, essentially. And so that's what God does. The sun doesn't go down, and it says the sun was up for a whole day. And it also says that this has never happened before, and it hadn't happened since. So it says a whole day. We can argue, it doesn't matter. It's a whole day, 24 hours, whatever. It was long enough that they called it a whole day, and it was long enough that they destroyed all the army that had come before them. And so the miracle being, we all know 24 hours a day, about half of that's going to be night. Well, not this day. God caused it to be day a lot longer.
We say there's not enough hours in the day, and Joshua got enough hours in that day.
He did, yep. Make sure I write down little notes, and then I get to talking and I forget the notes I was wanting, so let me make sure I don't miss any. All right, the next one, number 26, is Gideon. Gideon's an interesting guy to me. I would like to go study a little bit more because I read several chapters ahead of this getting ready, but there's a lot of chapters after that I didn't read. I want to see, exactly who does Gideon turn into. But Gideon's interesting to me to start with, at least, is that you have gullible people, you have really trusting people. He's opposite of that. I'd say non-trusting, if you will. There may be a better word for it. But so the story right before the fleece story is God shows up and tells, it's the angel of the Lord shows up and tells Gideon that he wants Gideon to go defeat the Midianites and the Amalekites. And to me, just right there, if the angel of the Lord appeared to me, I would assume that I'd be all game right then. I don't know, right? I don't know what the angel of the Lord looked like. If it looked like a person that just walked in, I'd give Gideon the benefit of the doubt. I don't know what it looked like. But Gideon right there didn't, how do I know you're really the angel of the Lord? He starts that kind of stuff, and that's where I say he's really untrusting. So the story with that one is, hey, make an altar. The angel of the Lord tells Gideon, make an altar. He puts meat and bread on the altar, and then fire comes out and consumes the meat and the bread and the altar. That's not the example that we're going over for this class, but that's the story right before this one. So that kind of gives you context of Gideon's already kind of into this. But then the story that we're going with here is right near the next chapter. The angel of the Lord still telling him, hey, I still want you to go battle the Midianites and Amalekites. And the angel of the Lord appears to him again and says this. Again, he's at this point, I think he's kind of, he knows the angel of the Lord is real. I think they just, covered that with the fire. But now he's not sure if God is going to be with him when he goes to battle. And which, you can read that one of two ways, right? Or probably more than one of two ways. But for me, I look at that as, okay, is that not trusting God, or is that, hey, just making sure, because there's several examples of people going into battles that didn't ask God first, and it didn't turn out well for them. So is Gideon making sure that that's what God wants, or is Gideon not trusting? I tend to think he's not trusting, but regardless, he needs a sign. So Gideon says, give me a sign that you will be with me in battle. And so the angel of the Lord says, put down fleece. And, Gideon's the one that comes up with the idea, going to put down fleece at nighttime, and in the morning, if the fleece is covered in dew and the ground's dry, then I'll know that you're going to be with me in battle. So he wakes up the next morning and the fleece is wet. He can wring water out of it. The ground's dry. At that point, you could argue that's probably would be good enough, but not for Gideon. Again, he doesn't trust, right? So just to make sure, one more night, this time do the opposite. The ground wet and the fleece dry. So he wakes up the next morning. That's what happens. The ground's wet, the fleece is dry this time. And so he decides, okay, the Lord is with me. And then the story, and that's our miracle, right? So anybody that's ever walked out on the grass in the morning times knows that when the dew falls, it falls on everything. You can't, so, back to back, dew falling where God wanted it to fall, that's the miracle. That confirmed the messenger. God's going to be with him. And Gideon's, happy with that as well. He goes into battle. The second story, or the follow-up to this, just, because if you're like me, you like to know the whole story. So this story is the one where, okay, Gideon takes the men. Apparently, if I read it right, about 32,000 men. They're going to battle the Midianites and the Amalekites. And this is a story where God says, no, that's too many. Why don't you, everybody that's afraid, go home. So it says 22,000 of them went home and 10,000 remained. And then it's the same story. If you remember, God tells Gideon, tell him, go down to the water. Whoever laps like a dog gets to stay. Whoever gets down on their hands and knees and drinks water leaves. And so they end up with 300 people. They're the ones that then go to the camp. They surround the camp, holler and shout during the dark, and God causes the Philistine folks, I bet not the Philistines, the Midianites and the Amalekites. I've done said it 5 times so I'd remember. God caused them to all get confused. They start killing each other. That's the story, but the fleece story is leading up to that.
Hey, Joey,
Yep.
I think it's easy for us to read in hindsight and kind of automatically think that how we would handle it. And, I mean, I don't know anybody may or may not have talked to an angel lately. I know my experiences I've had in life that, I don't know whether you say conversations with God or intimate moments, you have profound experiences, you know. I kind of see it, at least I've gone through different phases, but I kind of see it, at least right now, he is kind of maybe wondering, verification. Do you really want me to leave? I mean, he's going to have to step out and do something. And, these are unorthodox things that he's being asked to do. I mean, it'd be easy to doubt in that circumstance, whether you're like Thomas and you're like, no, I want to see for myself. I want to know and see if my Savior is risen. And I'm not going to believe until I thrust my hands to his side. Or I don't really want to do it. Really make me. I don't know that he was doubting so much in that regard, as much as maybe, are you really speaking to me? Is this really what you want me to do? And I don't judge him for his confirmation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, I don't know. It could go either way, and try. I don't know, because God,
In the battle, in the end, he did what God told him to do, so that's what he worked.
that's right. It's kind of the story I've heard several times of is God with us or not, and that type, conversations of when you're laying in bed at nighttime and you hear a dog barking across the street and you just can't go to sleep, and so you pray, God, please let that dog quit barking, and then the dog quits barking. Was that God, or did the dog just stop barking? Multiply that times 1,000. Gideon's he's fixing to go into a battle. If God isn't with him, he's going to die. So, yeah, you'd want to make sure.
And a lot
And-
of other people die too. It's not just him.
Right.
He's being responsible for a whole nation of people.
Yep. And to your point, I don't know. I don't know what it would look like if the angel of the Lord appeared and started talking to you. I don't know if that's if it was, a fire scene and a wind blowing. If it was a God on, talking to Moses on the mountain scene, I would believe it. If he looked similar to a human and talked similar to a human, you'd start to question. There we go. Yeah. And we're getting way off, but I'll say this, and I didn't want us to get too far, but that's the way I look at it. You get into conversations in today's world, and it's creeping into the Lord's church as well of, God speaking to us, and telling us to do. I don't believe that happens. I don't believe God's speaking to, I know he's never spoke to me, but regardless, the comeback, if you will, for that is, let's say he does. As long as he doesn't say anything that goes against what he's already told us, it's really a moot point. Without getting into discussions of God speaking or not. If let's say he does speak to somebody, as long as he says what he's already told us, who cares really? All right, getting way too far away from miracles. All right. Number 27.
Maybe not. You talk about confirming the message. That's the whole purpose of miracles.
It is.
And I do think that there is a message that he's trying to teach us through these lessons. Those things that are written aforetime are written for our learning, and that's what gives us hope. That's our security, our anchor. So I do think it does behoove us to dig into them deeply enough to ask God's wisdom, ask for God's wisdom and revealing His
Okay.
It is what's going to confirm the truth.
Yeah. I like the sideline thoughts, and I'm easy to get sidelined on it because well, recently when we were on a trip, you know, a lot of times when we're traveling, just like a lot of y'all, we may have church in the room with, you know, either there isn't a church there that we can go to, or we, you know, hadn't found it, whatever, but we have it. So a recent church for us, with me and Hayden got to speaking about some of the sideline stuff, and we lost Casey and Austin. They left somewhere during what was going to be a 20-minute discussion turned into about a 2-hour discussion, because we got sidelined with a lot of the ifs and a lot of the verses. So I like all of that, but and to your point, yeah, that's the purpose of miracles, is to confirm the messenger. So, you know,
God has never been afraid to let us see that these people were humans, and they were not perfect, and they didn't follow just, blindly. But it shows us that He will use us if we're willing, and I think that is the lesson that we see in Gideon. He didn't feel worthy. He uses terminology, my family's poor, I'm the least in my house. Like Moses, who am I? Why would they believe me? And so I think we see a lot of that same, it's a humble attitude, I think, that Gideon has.
Yeah.
And God lets us see those imperfections in the people that He uses. And that can give us a lot of hope, because, we're not superhumans either. We make mistakes, we all doubt, we have weaknesses. And so I think that is a beautiful thing that the Lord lets us see in His Scripture.
Good
Yeah.
point.
it is. That's a third way. I tend to be pretty hard on folks sometimes, myself included, of, God told him to do this, why didn't he go do it? But that's another point of, I could think of two. One was he wasn't believing, or I forget what I said, but the third that you just brought up that I hadn't even thought of was maybe he believes, maybe he's just saying, am I really that worthy? Am I really the one that you want me to do? Is there nobody better than me? Maybe he's looking at it with that kind of humility, and God's telling him, yeah, you are the one.
In this case with Gideon, we see the sword of the Lord did this. And they had a pitcher in one hand and a lamp in the other, or trumpet in the other. They busted the pitcher and they picked up a lamp. They had a trumpet and they're blowing on the trumpet, and they're saying the sword of the Lord. And God's using the swords of each other to fight each other, thinking that they're fighting against the enemy, and they kill each other. That's God's way of doing it. He did it with 300 men against all these thousands of people.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing within them that they've done it. He took all that away from them. Just like Rahab said, I see with a strong hand how God delivered Israel out of Egypt. It wasn't no little hand. He come out with a strong hand. Like, there's no doubt I picked you as the littlest people of all, the fewest. Because I don't want anybody to think that I picked the most powerful nation to take care and do what I want to do. I want everybody to know I'm the one that's doing it. And
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose each time, is to affirm to us, it's not man to do it. He just uses us what he can, or what, in a natural way. But in this case, they didn't do nothing. But break the pictures and blew the trumpet and said, the sword of the Lord. And that was it.
They obeyed.
They killed one another.
But the important thing is they did exactly what God told
You
them.
see?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, you could probably make the argument they didn't need, well, you couldn't. They didn't need 300. Yeah, God, they walked in with 300 thinking they didn't have enough people, but, and it says earlier when God, or the angel of the Lord, when it comes to Gideon, it says, I forget the exact word, through you, we're going to defeat I'm going to use you to defeat. He didn't say 300 people. He didn't say the army of, God's going to use him. God's going to defeat him. But yeah, to your point, he could have done it with one person. He didn't need anybody there.
All
Like
it was God doing it.
That's it. Yeah.
Not too many that, well, it could have been the men, because there was thousands of them. No, it was just 300 of them. There's no way they could do it without God.
Right.
And then even later on, I don't want to get ahead of it, but later on, the other tribe was going to be mad because you didn't include us. Well, where were you? You didn't come to start with, and then a bunch of you left too. You was afraid.
Right.
So it's easy to be boastful and stand up strong when it's all been taken care of. But before it's been taken of, you wanna know if that fleece is dry. Next day, I wanna know if it's wet, you know, like that. So it's always that reconfirming
Yeah.
going on. God never leaves it up to doubt.
And we're lucky enough to have all of the Old Testament to read all these stories. Gideon didn't have that,
To
right?
make sure we understand, like Marlene said, that want to see all our bad points too, so we learn from them. You know, history's there for the taking, it's for a reason. But we don't want to have to repeat the bad stuff. So you learn from your mistakes, and you know, like Joe said, that your back vision is 20/20. You know, when you see behind you know what you should have done. But when you're making that decision, it's hard to have that confidence like Gideon need to have, that I can take 300 and God's gonna take care of it. He said to Abraham, when he offered Isaac, now I know, she doesn't, I don't think it's God that knew then. I think now Abraham knew that he was willing to do anything God said because he knew God's word would be what it was supposed to be.
Right. Yeah, a lot of these folks, and Gideon be the same way of after this event. He'd be a little bit more bold, and it may not take 2 nights next time. All right, likewise, our next story, number 27, or our next miracle, number 27, again, the Israelites are just the point that you're just making of the Israelites want it to be, you know, their decisions. They want to be the one that decides when they go to battle, and they want to be the one that does the conquering. So that's what leads up to number 27 is the Israelites have gone to battle with the Philistines, and they've lost. God wasn't with them. They didn't bring, that God wasn't with them. And so the next battle they head into the Philistines with, they decide, we're going to bring God with us, which is a totally different way of looking at it versus what they should have looked at it as. They should have been asking God to be with them, but instead they took it upon themselves to bring God with them, and they decided to bring him with them in the way of the Ark of the Covenant. So they show up with the Ark of the Covenant in the camp, and they say, God's with us. And even the Philistines, it says, are getting scared. Oh no, God's with them. Apparently the Philistines either knew or they knew because they won the battle that God wasn't with them before, but now he's with them. Oh no. But they still go into battle, and the Philistines defeat the Israelites, because just by having the Ark of the Covenant there doesn't mean God was with them. That just meant they had the Ark of the Covenant with them. And the Philistines still beat the Israelites. And at the same time, the Philistines capture the Ark of the Covenant and take it back with them. And that's where we arrive with our miracle is they take it back to the name of the town is not here close, and I didn't write it down. Ashdod. And they put it in the house of Dagon, if I'm saying that right. Dagon is their god. And they've got a statue of Dagon sitting there. And so overnight, the Ark of the Covenant's there, Dagon, it's kind of like, when I was reading this, it's kind of like, if you're a Forrest Gump fan, when Lieutenant Dan's on top of the shrimp boat, and he's saying, God, where are you? And then Forrest Gump says, about that time, God showed up. Well, that's how this, God wasn't necessarily with the Israelites at that point. He wasn't necessarily with the ark, but when the Philistines started comparing God against Dagon, that's when God showed up. And so that night, well, the story picks up the next morning. It happens overnight. The next morning, the first night, Dagon is laying face down on the ground. The statue has fell over, laying face down, pointed towards the ark. Like, doesn't say it this way necessarily, but like it's worshiping the ark, right? Who's the God in charge? So they stand the statue back up. Night number 2. Next morning, statues fell over again. This time his heads broke off and his hands broke off. So the miracle here being that, statues normally, I don't know how big a statue is, but the statues don't just normally fall over during the middle of the night. And the reason for, to confirm the messenger here, well, the messenger is God in charge or is Dagon in charge? Well, Dagon was just a statue, God's in charge, and there's no doubt from the Philistines. And then let's say if there was any doubt, that's not the end of the story. That's kind of the beginning of, now God causes plagues to hit, it says bulls and I forget, but bad things, plagues of some kind are hitting Ashdod. And so what do? The Philistines don't get the ark out of here. We don't want it here. So they take it to another town, Gad, I believe. I believe it's Gad. They take it to another town.
Okay.
All right. And put it in somebody's house there, and the same thing. Now that city gets plagues. And they say, why'd you do this to us? We didn't have nothing to do with this. Take it somewhere else. And so they take it to a third place, and the third place sees it coming, and they're like, no, we don't want it here, but it still gets put there. And plagues start hitting them. So if there was ever any doubt, was God with the ark at that point, or was God in charge? I'll put it that way. The Philistines at that time, for those cities, knew that God's in charge. And it also, the kind of the end of that story too, they finally, the Philistines finally, they call on the priests and say, how do we get this back to Israel? And the priests give them, make a sacrifice, do it this way. They finally get it back to the Israelites. And the people of the Israelites, folks, when they get in Beth Shemesh, is where this occurs. When they open up the ark and look inside of it, and it says 50,070 people died. And you think, man, that's a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament is this way of, Christ is 5,000 people. So you think, half of, I don't know, a quarter to a half of Little Rock died because they looked inside the ark. But if they wasn't supposed to look inside the ark, and that's God's word. And we read time and time again in the Old Testament of, and Mr. Joe pointed out earlier, of what God says. We had this discussion at the house yesterday. Let your yeses be yes and your noes be noes. Well, God's yeses are yes and his noes are noes. And when he says do something, he means it. And at the end of this story proves that as well. So that is number 27.
One thing that's always struck me odd, or I wondered about, you talk about the side stories, how did they carry the ark around if they didn't die? Because God's instruction was instructions only to the Israelites that they carried, and so if they break that, they die, but the other people can touch it or carry it around on a cart or however way, and they not die. I've always tried to figure out in my mind what was happening, that they could carry the ark around, because they're going from house to house with this thing,
Yeah.
and they're carrying it around, but yet when we start carrying it, others are going to reach up and touch the ark.
Yeah.
It's going to kill him, and it goes back to what he said. Then they started carrying it with the staffs, and Korath carries it the way the Levites are supposed to carry it. Everybody's scared of it at that point. David's even mad about this.
Yeah.
But how were they carrying it prior to that?
Yeah.
Well, as long as they had it on the cart, nobody was dying till the ox stumbled in the cart. Uzzah reached up to touch it. He touched the ark. As long as they just touched those poles that were.
But they didn't carry the cart in the house. They carried it on the cart, but they didn't carry the cart in the house. They had to carry it from the cart to the whatever house they put it in beside the statue. So
That's going to be homework this week. How did the Philistines
it's just that stuff that don't matter.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I know they're supposed to do it, but I just wondered if that rule was only to the Israelites, because they're the only ones that had that command. So it's the only one it affects is doing that. The rest, if they get their hands on it, it doesn't affect them that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Or by luck, did they happen to use it? Who knows?
they were told exactly how to carry it. Not put it on a cart, they put it on staffs, and
Yeah.
be buried by certain people of the Levite tribe. And that was their job. And they couldn't even go in and look at it. They had to be covered up before they went into the most holy place and picked up the Ark of the Covenant. It had to be prepared for them to do it. There was stipulations all the way through it. I mean, it's just like what Joe said, it has to be exactly the way God says to do it.
God possibly allowed the Philistines to carry the ark because he wanted to use it to prove to them that their God wasn't anything.
Yeah.
And so when they carried it in and put it beside Dagon, then it caused Dagon to fall over and break, and so
Yeah,
God had a hand in it,
One,
how he got it
yeah.
in.
God gets to
One thing
decide
I don't know, but
at
God
the end of
made
the
sure
day.
it got
one thing you said a while ago, and it's the play with words, that coming from a denomination, I don't like words being said in such a way that might give you a different impression, but you said they made a statue of the god Dagon. Well, there ain't a god Dagon, you know, the statue is Dagon, you know,
Yeah.
that's it. So, you know, just, Brother Earl's always fine tuning me on all
Right.
stuff like that. you
They
know.
considered it their God, but it was just a statue. It
Yeah,
wasn't
it's just
God.
a statue.
Yeah.